Well, hello, everyone. It's the Plant-Based Business Hour. I'm Elysabeth Alfano. So today, let's just get right into it. We are in a health crisis. With COVID, we know more than ever people are concerned about their immunity, boosting their gut biomes, their general health, losing some weight, trying to stay healthy, get healthy, stay healthy, hashtag get healthy. We know all this. So what the heck are phytonutrients? What do they have to do with our health? How are they related to dark matter? And how the heck does dark matter help us navigate our health? We don't know the answer to these questions, which is why I'm bringing on my guest today, the wonderful Sofia Elizondo. She is the co-founder and COO of the biosciences firm Brightseed. Sofia, thanks for being with me.
So happy to be here.
Okay, so let me just read something to set it up because there's so much to unpack here and to go over. But we at Brightseed analyze plants at the molecular level in order to understand the specific roles that nutrients play in the proper functioning of our bodies. Brightseed is indexing the world's edible plants and their phytonutrients. In other words, the small molecules produced by plants that can positively impact the optimal functioning of the human body. Everybody with me? Less than 1% of existing phytonutrients have been identified. Why the heck is that? We're going to find out. Despite their prevalence in diets and traditional usage worldwide, Brightseed's artificial intelligence maps phytonutrients to specific human health targets. Oh my gosh. Let's start with, why are you focusing on phytonutrients?
Spot on. I loved how you opened why phytonutrients are so important and how we are in a very critical health moment worldwide. It is astounding to note that the number one lever or the number one reason why people have complications of COVID after age, which is highly related to complications of COVID, is underlying metabolic health.
Sure.
And all of this is preventable. The number one lever we have to pull is diet and what we eat. And the good news is that plants are chock full of good stuff. And Brightseed is essentially the reason we built Brightseed was to illuminate and activate these very deep connections that exist at a molecular level between plants and the human body so that we can further understand what kind of crops do we need to grow, what kind of products do we create with those crops so that we can ingest them for health outcomes.
Okay, so this is so fascinating to me. Why do you need artificial intelligence to do this? And I think your innovation that you've nicknamed Forager, do I have that right?
Yeah.
Why is artificial intelligence such a key here?
Yeah, it's a really great question. There is plants. Big picture, plants are prolific producers of 4 building blocks. One of them is protein. Mm-hmm. The other one is lipids, like olive oils. The third one is carbohydrates or fibers, like sugar. And finally, most of the plant genome actually encodes for natural compounds. These are natural chemicals that plants produce that actually defend them against pathogens, or the reason why bees are attracted to flowers. This is how plants communicate with their environment with these natural molecules. The problem,
sorry, just for those of us, I just want everyone listening today to really get a lot of information. And I think that sort of has to start with me when I don't understand things. So are those the phytonutrients that you're talking about? These
That's
codes?
right.
Yes. Okay.
That's right. These molecules, some of these molecules, when we ingest them, for plants, they protect them against pathogens and predators. When we ingest them as humans, they actually act as antioxidants, or they act as anti-inflammatory with anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial properties. And this is the deep connection that exists between plants and humans that we've only just started to uncover.
I want to get back to that. I think that's how I'm going to end. I'll just say, spoiler alert, that makes me kind of mad that we're just getting to that now. So I'll circle back to that. But okay, you're saying that as you work through the artificial intelligence to discover all these phytonutrients, so far we've only discovered 1%.
That's
Why
right.
is that? Are they so tricky to
That's
find,
right.
or we just didn't have the technology?
They are very, very tricky to find. And the world knows about 100,000 of them. And actually, 2/3 of drugs that are derived from natural products, including these molecules that exist in plants. So we know that they're very, very valuable, but they're very hard to find. Each of these takes many PhDs and many months to understand what is the molecule, what is the molecular structure, and how does it behave when it interacts with the human body. And this is why AI is so important. AI is particularly good at sifting through troves and troves of information and then finding patterns inside of that information. And so while science has the ability to generate all of this data about the predicted plant compounds inside of plants, it's super noisy and very unstructured, which is why a layer of artificial intelligence on top of all of this data is critical to make sense of it.
So fascinating. Okay, so now I understand what AI is doing in here, and I understand that there's this connection to our own health through basically getting this boost from plants. I'm grossly oversimplifying, of course. But I think you're talking about something called precision nutrition.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's from the molecular level, or are you talking about everyone's interest now that we have COVID? I think we talked about this in the beginning. It's really highlighted for people like, oh gosh, I have to keep my weight in check because that puts me at risk. Can't do anything about your age. Gosh darn it. That's another show. But you can keep things like diabetes down, high cholesterol down, high blood pressure, all these sorts of things that are affected ultimately by diet, which means food. So as you look to food as medicine, when you talk about precision nutrition, is this tailoring the diet to each specific person, or are you talking about tailoring the molecules?
Yeah, it's so exciting. I love this topic because the last 10 years or so, we've been able to get very precise with human knowledge. We mapped the human genome. I've swabbed my cheek with 23andMe. I know how genetically unique I am, but we have not been able to have the same level of detail when it comes to plants. And this is the resolution that Brightseed is bringing to the space. So we have a ton of detail about humans and what our reactions may be to certain intake of certain foods, but we don't have the same level of detail for plants. So in order to make precision nutrition a reality or even a possibility, we need to be able to have high resolution on both of these, plants and humans, so that we can connect at a very precise level what is the best diet and what products or plant sources carry the molecules that make this precisely the best diet for your precise organism.
I'm getting a little ahead of myself because usually I end the show with predictions, but I foresee something where you could prick your blood, send it into a lab, not go to the doctor's office, all this kind of stuff, wait for weeks. You could just prick your own blood, send it into the lab. They'd say, gee, you're a little deficient here and here. We recommend artichokes or something like this. Do you see that as coming?
Even take it a step further. We recommend these kinds of artichokes. Make sure you buy the ones that are grown in this way, because when they're harvested and grown in this way, they actually express this phytonutrient that is so critical to our diet, to you in particular, and for your health. You know how I'm sure you've had a strawberry that just explodes with flavor in your mouth, and a strawberry that doesn't taste like anything.
Yes.
Flavor is imagine that flavor is an example of the expression of these natural compounds. And so just like a strawberry can be full of flavor and a strawberry can taste like cardboard, your future prediction artichoke can be full of these phytonutrients that will make a difference for your health or not really have a lot of them. And that's where we need to start. What are the phytonutrients that are important is the first question. How do we grow our crops to make sure that these plant sources express them? And then how do we make sure that the products that eventually make it to the hands of consumers, whether they're fresh produce or packaged produce, right? I may have raisins in my granola in the morning. How do I make sure that those products are actually chock full of these phytonutrients so that they can make a difference?
So this is so exciting because you're talking about not just this knowledge that you're getting and that can affect our health, but you're ultimately talking about perhaps changing the way we farm and the way that we ship our food. So you are talking about a huge revolution, which is what I like to do on this show, which is so fascinating to me. But let me just double back and I guess share my ignorance here, but maybe there are others who are listening who have the same question. So I want to be upfront. Does this fall into the genetically modified category, in that if you're starting to say, oh, hey, these artichokes aren't going to have a lot of flavor because they were monocropped. I'm just pulling things out of the air. Obviously, artichokes aren't monocropped, but they're, in this instance, they're monocropped. So we need to regenerate the soil, which means we need to crop different things. You know, we need to farm different things, perhaps we'll say next to each other that coincide together. That's kind of a regular farming technique. Or are you talking about genetically modifying plants to express what one person needs for their diet?
Great question. And a really good moment to emphasize that Brightseed's technology was created to understand nature more deeply and more precisely than we've ever been able to before. So Brightseed doesn't modify genes. We don't engineer or synthesize anything. All of our AI and all of our technology is to understand more deeply, so that we can look and see the answers that are already there. And that is where we start.
Okay. And so much to dive into there, but I just want to again clarify. So you don't consider yourself a supplier of ingredients by any means, do you?
That is a great question. And today we don't.
Today, right?
Yeah, today our technological platform Forager is a hardware and a software layer on a lab, but it is not. We don't supply ingredients to deliver to partners.
Okay. And we're going to get into your partners because that's very interesting too. But before we do that, I don't want to leave this topic of why the heck we didn't know about this before. So it's something that you refer to as dark matter. I also want to read something from your PR folks. They were so great. Serene, thank you for all the help you've given me. But okay, as the plant-based and functional foods category have exploded, more science is needed to elucidate the link to what we eat and the health outcomes they have in our bodies. We know certain diets have certain health outcomes, but we don't fully know why. How can that be?
Yes. That's the same question I ask myself. How do we not know this? which is why I love the moniker, the dark matter. It just like in the universe and stars, we know that there is dark matter that is moving galaxies across space, and we barely understand it. In our food and in our diets, we know that when we eat a diet that is full of plant-based nuts and seeds and legumes, we know that that is correlated. It actually leads to longer and healthier lives. We know that for a fact. The question is, we don't know why. At a molecular level, biologically, what happens when we eat all of these plant-based foods? What molecules in the plant interact with what targets, biological targets in our bodies, to create what kind of chain effects that generate these lovely benefits that we're blind to? Pharma knows this kind of space, but in a very specific, drug to benefit one-to-one relationship. We don't know it broadly when it comes to the relationship between all of the phytonutrients in our diet and the health outcomes that those generate.
So I'm shocked. I'm shocked. Before the world started eating meat, we relied on plants. You'd think this would be the first thing we'd study. Is it because it's just so darn complex, or is it because we've been lacking the funding?
Yeah, really great question. I think both. It is pretty complex, and there have been many brilliant minds that have studied it. Technology is now coming to a place where we have both the physical equipment to create a lot of data and the software to analyze it with machine learning. So it is a moment in science that we're just at the frontier of, that we can take advantage and really dive into this dark matter. And it's also a funding thing.
Yeah.
We now have the imperative to move into proactive health, and it has been a long brewing, slow crisis with COVID that has become top of the agenda as well.
Oh, you're being kind. It's been a race to the bottom, and now we're trying to pick ourselves up. I see that you are starting with, because you say it's only 1% of the phytonutrients of all the food out there that we eat, and I'll say tamper with. So it's only 1% really that we understand. You are starting with soy as your first legume, I guess I'll say, to really discover and figure out what it does. Soy, oh, how I love you, gets such an awful bad rap. When I think of soy, just expressing perhaps my ignorance here, but maybe other people will feel my pain. There's estrogen, and then there's phytoestrogen, and it's one of the things that comes from soy, which is so healthy for you. But I'm curious, soy gets such a bad rap. Why did you decide to start with soy?
Yeah, great question. Indeed, we're working on soy with Danone, and Danone has been a fantastic partner to Brightseed. With Danone, we're illuminating the crops that are part of their plant-based product portfolio, and soy is a very important crop in their plant-based portfolio. The hero ingredient behind soy silk milk, their brand. Brightseed, however, has analyzed many more plants and created data on hundreds of thousands of compounds that exist in those plants. So Brightseed has very much the mandate to be quite broad, so that we can amass information and find patterns that are applied to crops that broadly have a history of human consumption, and those are in the tens of thousands, and not necessarily only soy. So there is a with Danone, however, we did start there because it is such an important part of their portfolio, and how they bring the benefits of plant-based products to the market.
Yes, and this just shows how complex this subject is of phytonutrients in the entire plant kingdom, which is ginormous. I think of soy, and I think of soy, but soy derivative or soy protein isolate, or is it GMO or is it non-GMO? And you were talking before about how each of these iterations can have different expressions in your own body, your own health, and trigger different pathways, if you will. Probably the wrong expression. Sure. So soy is such a complicated one, in that in its healthiest form, the soybean or tempeh or something like this, so fantastic for you. Tofu, right up there, quite good, but then you can really destroy soy by over processing it and not get anything from it. So it is a complex beast. Where are you starting within that quagmire?
Yeah, that is a really good question. Soy, you mentioned phytoestrogens. Soy also has compounds that are clinically proven to be connected to cardiovascular health.
Yes.
So soy indeed is a fantastic legume to have in our diets, but it is a very complex crop. And that is where we start. We first ask the question, how much visibility can we get into the expression of phytonutrients that soy can provide? And you would be surprised, soy is one of the most studied crops in the world. And yet forager can see beyond what science already knows. And we start by asking that question, what phytonutrients are actually in the plant sources? And then forager is uniquely able to predict, how are these phytonutrients connected with different health benefits? Once we establish those connections, then the real fun part begins, which is, how can we make sure that when we process soy, we maintain the concentration of the phytonutrients that make a difference? The reason why this was hard before is because we couldn't see them.
Mm.
It is really hard to design a process to optimize for the presence of a phytonutrient if we don't know that it's there, or if we don't know that it is important for a certain health benefit.
Wow. So, in an ideal world, you would work with a company like Danone and you would look at soy and you would say, okay, it needs to go through these processing techniques to get into the product. But in doing so, we're discovering that we've destroyed some of the phytonutrients that we need. So, how do we keep it in there? Gross overstatements here. How do we keep it in there
That's
as
it.
we move forward?
Exactly.
So hats off to Danone for
Hats off.
wanting to get on top of this and bring more nutrients. Ultimately, that's what it is, bringing more nutrients to their foods and products that would keep us in better health. What kind of time frame are we looking at?
Hats off to Danone. I really, really want to underscore that, Elizabeth. Danone is the world's largest B Corp.
Mm.
They are also now listed as an entreprise de mission, which is a socially oriented mission company in France. They take one planet, one health very, very seriously and invest in not only great tasting products that consumers love, but also regenerative and sustainable agricultural practices, as well as health benefits that their products are associated with. So hats off to Danone and for them to have the courage to tackle these kinds of issues so forwardly and very wholeheartedly.
Well, Danone, you are welcome on this show anytime. And I'm kind of not kidding. I've tried to get them on the show. I think they were a little afraid of the title plant-based. I don't know. I think they've been a little afraid of me, but I promise not to bite. I would love to have Danone on the Plant-Based Business Hour. But so what kind of time frame are we talking about here?
Yeah, it's ideally there is a very, talking broadly beyond the Danone relationship, there are short-term wins and long-term wins here. Short-term wins can be as simple as maximizing what we already know is good in plants. We all know that blueberries have antioxidants. I don't know that we all know, but this is certainly true. Broccoli has a specific compound called sulforaphane. And sulforaphane has been proven to have beneficial properties for cancer patients. So we know that certain crops have certain molecules or phytonutrients that are valuable. That is a quick win. Let's make sure that the crops that we grow and harvest and consume are chock full of these phytonutrients, and Brightseed is there for the journey to make sure that we can support the partners that grow and package and deliver these products, make sure that they have indeed the phytonutrients that make them so healthy. The long-term win here is food as medicine. How do we clinically validate that this phytonutrient from this plant source actually is having a clinical benefit? And that I'm calling that a long-term play because clinical validation is not fast, and there are very stringent processes and trials to prove these kinds of benefits, which is really important for the space. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and it is important to keep the standards really high to prove clinical efficacy if we really want to move the needle on health outcomes.
And is Brightseed really leading the way here? I mean, this is this kind of AI technology to discover phytonutrients to keep the molecules that are in our ingredients intact, so that when they're put into our foods, they maintain their nutrient benefits. I, of course, like you say, I know kind of about antioxidants and blueberries, et cetera. I do know these things, but this is the first I've ever heard of artificial intelligence trying to map these phytonutrients. Are you guys the only ones?
As far as I know. So
exciting.
It is a space that there's a lot to do. And I think, I'm going to use that as a segue to speak about how Brightseed believes in partnerships to make really transformative changes happen. Because it really, even if Brightseed is pioneering, and we are the first company to build an artificial intelligence to understand the dark matter of nutrition and illuminate the phytonutrients that are connected to health, man, if it's only us, or if it's only us and Danone, we're not going to move the needle for the world.
Mm-hmm.
So we really believe that the future of food and health depends on cross-disciplinary partnerships. And we want to pioneer in that way of working as well.
Yes, so very exciting. I would think that there would be a list of international companies that would be interested in this.
There is a big initiative that has been coordinated by the World Economic Forum that we're a very active part in. Brightseed was selected as the technology pioneer this year. And there is a big initiative inside of the World Economic Forum that brings together the players that are interested and very vested in mapping this very detailed view of phytonutrients. And so it's emerging, and there is a lot of activity in this space.
So I wanted to talk to you about that because I did see in doing the research on you that you have been involved in the UN Global Impact Committee group, helping with sustainability guidelines at the World Economic Forum. We're talking about plants, therefore we're talking about sustainability. It's in a way, it's as simple as that in my mind. But perhaps you could underscore the relationship between the work you're doing in through artificial intelligence, mapping out the phytonutrients in plants to actual sustainability initiatives. Help me there.
Yeah, really, really great question. You're right. I personally have been involved with the United Nations. I worked with the UN Global Compact, which is the only agency of the UN that has a mission to work with the private sector.
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, to further develop and reach the Sustainable Development Goals. So the work that Brightseed is doing and its relationship with sustainability really starts at the plant. Exactly what you said. If we understand the value that plants bring, and then we can start to valorize the supply chain and everyone who is involved upstream, starting with the farmers and starting with the soil. And that is, if we treat everything as a commodity, then it will be a race to the bottom. If we understand the value that each of these unique plant sources bring, and in particular, the value and the benefits and the money that they can save with healthcare costs, then we really start understanding that there is a lot of value to be captured. And I see that as very interconnected with sustainability.
Yeah, I'll sort of say it another way. So to not capitalize on this, I say capitalize not just in the monetary sense, but also in the initiative sense, to not move forward on this and lose the molecular nutrients that are so vital to our health is like shooting ourselves in the foot. So sometimes I wonder, are we trying to become extinct? I mean, here we have these things, these tools that can help us that are just right here at our fingertips. And this is why I say in the beginning, I'm a little bit mad about this. But instead, we're focusing on, meat as if that was the ingredient that was going to keep us healthy. And the more and more we know about it, the more we know that the things that we really need to keep us healthy are plants. And, are we on our own side or are we against ourselves? Sometimes I wonder. So I couldn't agree more. I think this, from a business standpoint, is going to be a very efficient equation. And you're going to realize the economic benefits that come from really harvesting all that there is from plants, including those phytonutrients.
Exactly. Precisely right.
Okay, so I have a couple exit questions for you that I always like to ask people. This is kind of off the cuff. Sometimes they're long answers, sometimes it's just one word answers. So you just kind of find your way there. What do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now? And you can reshape that if you want to say 7 or 5, but what are you focusing on now that you say, gosh, I really wish I knew this a while back?
That is a really great question. I think I can answer that as as an entrepreneur, because the journey of building a company in a space that is emerging with science and technology is always a journey. The path has never been hasn't been carved or trodden yet. And you know what? We've realized that Brightseed focus on novel phytonutrients, the 99% of the plant kingdom that we have yet to get to know and to incorporate it deliberately into our diets. I realize now that we may be ahead of the curve of the food industry. A lot of the big actors, a lot, and not all, for certainly not all, but a lot of the big actors in the food industry are still focused on taking the bad out instead of making sure that the good stuff is still in it. And in that sense, Brightseed is calibrating to make sure that we find the right partners that are mission aligned on the outset, that are right there with us 5 years ahead of the curve, and that are willing to invest in this pioneering edge of science and technology and health and plants and nutrition. Not everyone is there. And 5 years ago, I think we hoped and anticipated everybody to see what we see. And now we are realizing we're going there for sure, and the right partners in the journey are going to make a big difference.
Well, thank you for being such an intrepid pioneer. I'm wondering if you ever feel that because you've chosen to focus on the nutrients of plants, that you ever come up across blockades, because there are lobbies and industries that don't want plants to be the lead. And I'm wondering if you ever feel that you've got to, really wrestle with a hockey hip check to keep moving forward.
Good question. That hockey check gave me a visual very, very, very much so. Not yet. Honestly, not yet.
Great.
What we have realized is that there is a tension between drugs that cure disease and ingredients that prevent disease. And there is and that is something that is fascinating to get to know intimately and to navigate. The entire healthcare system, if you look back 100 years ago, was built to cure infectious diseases. And by definition, you don't have a disease until you get infected, and then you get a drug, and then problem solved.
So not preventative.
Not preventative. But today, the majority of us suffer from chronic illnesses. And the healthcare system and the system of developing and delivering drugs wasn't quite made for chronic disease. Chronic diseases are very complex, that require that have an intersection of multiple biological targets that together create a chronic condition. And drugs aren't quite made to address that very effectively. And I think that is a bit of a tension that we navigate as well when we look at proactive health, making sure that we maintain a very high standard of clinical benefit and evidence. And that entire space was designed for drug development. And so there is a middle that is emerging that we very much seek to pioneer in. And that has been an interesting tension in the space that we navigate.
Well, I don't want to be Pollyanna because it doesn't always work out this way. But you talk about partners, and could you see big pharma as being a partner? I mean, I don't see why they couldn't financially benefit from this if they chose to see it that way.
I don't disagree at all. 2/3 of FDA-approved drugs are derived from small molecules in natural products, and it is a treasure trove. Plants are a treasure trove, and their phytonutrients and small molecules are a treasure trove for future medicine. And so absolutely, just as we're partnering With large food companies, I can see a world where we partner with forward-thinking biopharma companies to bring the solutions to life and essentially bring the power of plants all the way from farm to food to supplements and nutrients and medicine in all of their glory.
And I actually see a world where this would extend beyond humans, and it could extend for planetary health as well, regenerating the Amazon through, nutrients from certain plants that, I won't go into it, but I can see where the circles just keep expanding. So we are talking about the future of the world, basically. Can you give me your predictions for, let's say, 3 to 5 years out? If I interview you again, which I'd love to do in 3 years, what are you going to tell me?
That would be great. I think, I hope that 3 years from now, I tell you unequivocally, Elizabeth, these two things worked out. One, it is true that together with the right partners, you can make much more of a difference than as a single actor. And here are the examples of that. And two, I would hope that in 3 years, I could tell you, man, we have all of this technology and we pointed it to deeply understand nature instead of mess with it. And that paid off. We are already sitting on a lot of wisdom that we just need to realize and activate.
Godspeed. Godspeed, because it is so incredibly powerful, but in the wrong hands or with the wrong mission, you could waste decades. In the right hands with the right mission, you could have that answer for me in 3 years. So, I'm counting on you. No pressure, but so I do now have really the truest, quickest of exit questions. So in science, a lot of it is trial and error. You talk about clinical studies, et cetera. You hope to have an outcome. It doesn't work out. It's a lot of 2 steps up, 3 steps back, 2 steps up, 1 step back, and then 5 steps up, so it's back and forth and back and forth. If you're having a bad day, you're in the lab, you're not getting the results you want. Is there a phrase that you tell yourself to get yourself back in the game?
It's worth it, I think.
Oh, nice. It's worth it. It's worth it. Hashtag it's worth it. I agree with you.
That's why mission matters, and that's why purpose matters. Because it's going to be really hard, almost by definition, but it's worth it.
So all this studying of plants, do you consider yourself a foodie? And what is your favorite food?
I should always be prepared for this question. I have a favorite food category.
Okay.
And that is breakfast.
Oh.
I think I could have breakfast for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
And so what do you eat for breakfast?
I vary that quite a bit. I love oatmeal with all kinds of goodies and spices.
Yeah.
I love yogurt with all kinds of goodies and crunchy and fruit. My husband and I are big fans of smoothies of whatever is in season. Whatever we get from our farmer's box, we make into super delicious smoothies, and that's a big breakfast staple as well.
I'll do another shout out for Danone because I do love their plant-based yogurts. And yes. I so love that they're on board with that and they're getting with the program, and it is so awesome. Sofia, I just want to thank you. Sofia Elizondo, I want to thank you for what you and Brightseed, the company that you co-founded, the bioscience company that you co-founded. I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing. I really do expect you to change the future, poor thing. So, get on it. And thank you for doing that work. I do hope that you will come back. For everybody watching here on all the socials, I want to say that if you ever miss a Plant-Based Business Hour, of course, you can get this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. It will be out on the podcast platform soon. Google, iTunes, all that stuff. Just where this particular interview will be out in about 3 days, but you can always get the back catalog. So if you're ever confused about that, you can always go to my website, elizabethalfano.com/PBH. Also check out brightseedbio.com, the biosciences company that is Brightseed, co-founded by Sofia Elizondo. Sofia, thank you for being with me. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much.
I do hope that you'll come back.
I'm sure I will. And when I do, the world will know the power of phytonutrients, and we'll be clamoring for them, and it'll be great.
Wonderful. Hooray, hooray. Okay. I'm saying goodbye to everybody. Sofia, you stay put. Everybody else, I will see you next week, 1 o'clock on Tuesday at 1 p.m. for another edition of the Plant